The flashing red and blue lights danced in the rearview mirror like warning signals from another world. General Marcus Ellison exhaled slowly and pulled his black Range Rover to the side of the road. It was nearly midnight, and the quiet stretch of Virginia highway was empty, but for his car, and now the approaching police cruiser. He turned off the engine, kept both hands on the wheel, and watched through the side mirror as two officers stepped out. Their body language was already aggressive. He could see one of them unhooking his holster. Marcus wore his Army service uniform, sharp creases, polished shoes, and the unmistakable 4 stars that sat on his shoulder epaulets. He had just returned from a Pentagon dinner and was heading home to his wife and son. He was still replaying his speech in his head, thinking about tomorrow's itinerary. Now his focus shifted sharply. A flashlight beam hit him in the face before he could say a word. "License and registration," the older officer barked, ignoring the uniform completely. Marcus remained calm. "Officer, before I move my hands, I just want to let you know I'm out of the car," the younger cop yelled suddenly, pointing his flashlight and hand toward the door. "Now!" Marcus frowned but complied. "Okay, I'm reaching for the door handle now." He stepped out, tall and composed, the gleam of his medals catching the light. For a split second, the officers seemed confused, like they couldn't process what they were looking at. A black man in a luxury SUV wearing stars on his shoulders. It didn't compute. The older officer stepped forward. "Where'd you get that uniform?" Marcus blinked. "Sir, I'm General Marcus Ellison, United States." "Army, I just left a Pentagon." "Don't lie to us," the younger one cut in. "Impersonating an officer is a felony." "I am an officer," Marcus said slowly. "I outrank just about everyone in that building you're supposed to be protecting." Before he could finish, the older cop grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. "Put your hands behind your back, now." Marcus stiffened. "You're making a mistake." "Tell it to the judge," the officer muttered. Click. The handcuffs clamped around his wrists, cold and metallic, slicing through the dignity he had spent a lifetime building. A teenager on the sidewalk across the street held up a phone, recording. "Yo, is that a general? What the hell?" The flashlight beam dropped, but the damage was done. A crowd had begun to gather. Someone shouted, "You can't cuff a general." Another yelled, "That's Marcus Ellison, man. Are y'all serious?" But the officers weren't listening. They shoved Marcus toward the squad car, pressing his head down as they stuffed him inside. Inside the cruiser, Marcus sat still. He didn't cry, didn't beg. He just stared out the window as the first wave of disbelief rolled over him, followed by something deeper, a quiet fury. Half an hour later at the precinct, chaos began to unfold. A desk sergeant picked up the phone, listening for only a moment before his eyes widened. "Yes, sir, yes, immediately." He hung up and looked toward the 2 arresting officers, now standing smugly by the holding cell. "You 2 are about to have the worst night of your careers." "What are you talking about?" the younger one said, arms crossed. The sergeant turned pale. "That's not some actor or fake. That's a decorated 4-star general. And the Pentagon just called." Meanwhile, in a small room, Marcus sat alone, wrists bruised, dignity cracked but not broken. His mind drifted, not to rage or revenge, but to Caleb, his 13-year-old son, who once asked him, "Dad, does being a general mean people always respect you?" He hadn't answered then, but now he knew, and his silence had become a storm. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Long before the medals, before the Pentagon briefings, and rows of salutes, Marcus Ellison was just a boy running barefoot down the cracked sidewalks of Southside Chicago. Back then, home was a 2-bedroom apartment above a barbershop. It smelled like old hair clippings and fried chicken grease. His mother, Lorraine, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, and his father, Darnell, patched cars in the alley behind the shop. Money was tight, tempers were tighter. But there was love in that home, gritty, unspoken love. At 12, Marcus saw his first dead body. It was his cousin Ray, 17 years old, shot over a corner that didn't belong to either gang. That night, Marcus watched his mother scrub blood off the front steps with bleach and tears. He remembered the way she muttered under her breath, "Ain't nobody saving us, Marcus. We gotta save ourselves." That line etched itself into his bones. In middle school he kept to himself, skinny, quiet, always reading. He wasn't trying to be better than anyone, just trying to get out before the city swallowed him whole. His little brother Deshaun, 2 years younger, wasn't so lucky. Deshaun idolized the street legends. He walked with his chest out, tried to talk like the older guys, and got into trouble early. One night, Marcus found him passed out in the kitchen, high, shaking, only 15. That was the final straw. He remembered going to the recruiting station alone. He didn't even tell his mom until after he passed the ASVAB. "I'm joining the army," he'd said flatly over dinner. Lorraine had stared at him for a long second. "They don't send boys like you to desks. They send you where people die." "I'd rather take my chances over there," Marcus said, "than end up like Ray over here." She didn't cry, just nodded, then said the words that would shape him forever. "Then don't just survive it, make them remember your damn name." Boot camp was hell, not because of the drills, but because Marcus was too smart and too quiet. Some of the other recruits tried to break him down. They called him professor, mocked his accent, tried to rattle him, but he had something they didn't: purpose. After basic, he applied for officer candidate school. His instructors told him not to bother, that guys like you usually didn't make it. He applied anyway, scored in the top 5 percentile. It was during officer school that he met Colonel James Wexler, his commanding officer during their deployment to Iraq. Wexler was old-school army, silver hair, gravel voice, and a steel spine, but he was fair. Brutally so. During a briefing one day, Wexler interrupted him mid-sentence. "You speak like you're apologizing for knowing the answer," he barked. Marcus blinked. "Sir, you're the smartest damn man in this room. Act like it, lead like it, or get the hell out of my unit." It stung, but Wexler wasn't mocking him. He was challenging him. That night, Marcus sat alone in the tent and thought about his mom's words. "Make them remember your name." He didn't sleep. He just planned, and from that night forward, something in him changed. By 38, Marcus had commanded more combat units than most did in their lifetime. By 42, he made brigadier general, the first black man from Southside Chicago to do so in over 2 decades. He married his college sweetheart, Danielle, a brilliant med student from Howard who kept him grounded. She never saluted him, never treated him like anything other than the same boy who showed up at her dorm wearing 2 left socks and flowers he stole from the campus garden. They had one child, Caleb. Marcus was gone for most of Caleb's early birthdays, always chasing down missions, budgets, and threats overseas. But when he was home, he was present, fully. He taught Caleb how to box, how to tie a tie, and how to talk to people like you meant every word. But there was always that look in Caleb's eyes when Marcus walked in the door after a 6-month deployment, a mix of awe, love, and confusion, as if wondering, why does the world need my dad more than I do? That thought haunted Marcus, far more than any bullet or bomb ever had. And yet, he couldn't stop. He believed in the mission, in service, in the idea that no matter how broken the system was, it was still his system, and he could shape it. That belief was what led him to that Pentagon dinner, to the uniform he wore with such pride, to the words he was still replaying in his head as the cops shoved him into the back of a squad car like a suspect instead of a soldier. He thought of Caleb, of Lorraine, of Deshaun, who'd just gotten out of prison 6 months ago and was trying to do right, and of Wexler, now retired but always a phone call away. They had all built him, piece by piece, and now 2 uniforms with no stars had tried to strip all, shove it away in a single night. As the squad car turned the corner that night, Marcus looked out at the blinking city skyline and whispered to no one, "They really don't see us." But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far, far bigger. The police station's fluorescent lights buzzed above General Marcus Ellison's head like a taunt. He sat cuffed to a metal bench in a holding area that smelled of cheap coffee, bleach, and desperation. His wrists were still red from the cuffs, his jaw tight, but his back still straight. Across from him, the arresting officers stood with arms crossed. Sergeant Bill Crawford, a grizzled, crew-cut cop who carried himself like the law began and ended with him. and Officer Nate Bradley, younger, unsure, and increasingly fidgety. Bradley had been watching Marcus ever since they got back from the traffic stop. At first, he thought this was just another high-profile arrest, maybe a stolen uniform, maybe stolen valor, but now the edges were fraying. He whispered to Crawford, "You sure he's not legit?" Crawford snorted. "Please. That uniform. Could have picked it up at a military surplus store. You ever hear of a black four-star general named Ellison?" Bradley hesitated. "Actually, yeah, I think I've seen him in some defense briefings online. He might—" Crawford cut him off. "Don't go soft on me now, rookie. That guy's running a con and we just stopped him from pulling it on. Someone else." But Bradley wasn't so sure, and the longer Marcus sat there, silent, composed, eyes burning with something that felt far deeper than anger, the less confident he felt. Behind the glass, Lieutenant Martinez walked briskly into the room, holding a phone to her ear. Her face turned ghost white as she listened. She tapped the glass twice and motioned toward Crawford. "Sergeant, step outside now." Crawford grunted, annoyed, but followed her out. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "I asked you 4 times to verify my identity. You refused." Bradley shifted, uncomfortable. "We followed procedure, sir." Marcus looked him in the eyes. "Did you?" Bradley dropped his gaze. Outside the room, chaos was brewing. "The Pentagon," Crawford said, incredulous. "You've got to be kidding." Martinez nearly dropped the phone. "They're sending a team over. Brass. High level. You're in deep, Bill. This man is General Marcus Ellison. He outranks almost everyone in D.C. Crawford's mouth opened, then closed. This is some mix-up." "No," Martinez said. "This is you screwing up big, on camera, with the whole country about to see it." Back in the holding room, Bradley quietly uncuffed Marcus. "They're verifying things now. I think they're going to let you go soon." Marcus rubbed his wrists. "Not soon enough." Bradley hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know." Marcus tilted his head. "You saw the stars, the ribbons, the name tag." I thought maybe it wasn't real." Marcus nodded slowly. "Because it didn't fit what you expected. Because a man who looks like me, driving a nice car, wearing this uniform, didn't make sense to you." Bradley didn't answer. An hour later, Marcus stood in the precinct lobby. A quiet storm now surrounded the building. Pentagon staff, reporters, even 2 Congress people had arrived on scene. The Secretary of the Army had already issued a formal inquiry. Flashbulbs popped through the windows. Cameras rolled, but Marcus didn't speak to the press. He walked out calmly, head high, past the crowd, past the reporters shouting his name, past the cameras eager to devour every word he might give. Danielle was waiting by the curb, standing, next to a black SUV with the government plates. Her eyes welled up when she saw him. "Marcus!" He stepped into her arms, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding since the lights flashed behind him hours ago. That night, the video hit the internet. Not just the bystanders clip, but the leaked body cam footage. The part where Crawford sneered, "You're just another black man in a nice car." The part where Marcus said calmly, "I'm a general," and Crawford replied, "Sure you are, and I'm the damn president." It went viral within minutes. Justice for Marcus were stars and stripes, respect or vets. The hashtags trended on every platform. Celebrities weighed in. Veterans from every branch made videos in support. A retired Navy SEAL with 1 million followers posted, "I don't care what color you are, you don't treat a 4-star general like that, ever." But it wasn't just about Marcus. It was about the millions of men and women who looked like him, who were pulled over, questioned, cuffed, belittled, not because they broke the law, but because of what they represented to those in power. Meanwhile, inside the walls of that same precinct, Sergeant Crawford was suspended pending an investigation. Internal affairs showed up within hours. Officer Bradley gave a statement, every detail, every word. His voice trembled as he admitted, "I should have listened. I saw the stars, I knew the name. I let bias cloud my judgment." At home, Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, still in uniform. He didn't even realize he hadn't taken it off. Caleb knocked once, then stepped in. "Hey, Dad?" Marcus turned. "Hey, bud." Caleb looked up at him. "Mom said you got arrested." "I did. But you didn't do anything wrong." "No," Marcus said softly. "I didn't." Caleb paused. "Will it happen to me too? Someday?" The question hit like a sniper round. Marcus crouched down, pulled his son into a hug. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it doesn't." But deep down, he wasn't sure if that was a promise he could keep. The phone on Secretary Elaine Trask's mahogany desk rang just before 6 a.m. She was already awake. Former Army herself, never lost the habit. D.C. was still dark, the sun just beginning to color the edges of the horizon. She answered on the first ring. "This is Trask." "Ma'am," the voice on the other end said briskly, "we've got a situation, a general, a video. It's going viral." That got her full attention. "Which general?" she asked already. Sitting straighter. "Marcus Ellison." She was silent for half a second. "Send me everything." By 6:30, the Joint Chiefs had seen the footage. By 7, the White House Chief of Staff had called for a full briefing, and by 7:15, Trask was staring at the now infamous video playing across CNN, Fox, and Twitter feeds nationwide. There he was, 4-star General Ellison, calm and composed in his decorated Army service uniform, being slammed against a squad car by local cops like some two-bit criminal. The audio was clear. The tone, undeniable. Crawford's voice. "You're just another black man in a nice car." The image froze on Ellison's face, dignity undented, eyes locked on the cop's hand on his chest. "This is a fucking disaster," muttered General Blake from the Marine Corps. "No," Trask said firmly. "This is a turning point. If we don't respond fast and loud, we're complicit." By 90, Trask had Marcus on a secure line. "General Ellison," she said, her voice a mix of steel and sympathy. "First, let me say, what happened to you is unacceptable. I'm personally overseeing the Department of Defense's response, but I need to know, what do you want to do?" There was a long pause. Then, "I want every young soldier, especially the ones who look like me, to know that this uniform means something. That it protects them not just abroad but at home." Trask nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." That afternoon, a press release from the Pentagon was issued. It was blunt, unapologetic, and powerful. "General, Marcus Ellison has served this country for over 30 years, with honor, courage, and distinction. What happened to him is not just a personal injustice, it is a national disgrace. This department will not remain silent while one of our own is disrespected, detained, and dehumanized based on the color of his skin. There will be accountability. And there will be change." Signed, Elaine Trask, Secretary of the Army. Cable news anchors were speechless. It was the most direct condemnation of law enforcement misconduct by the Pentagon in decades. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't just about Marcus Ellison, the man in uniform. It was about every service member of color, whoever felt invisible the moment they took the uniform off. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his home office, fielding call after call. Support flooded in. Old war buddies, foreign diplomats, even a retired president who left a voicemail saying, "General Ellison, you shouldn't have had to go through that. But I know you'll lead us through it now that you have." Danielle came in holding her phone. "Marcus, the White House wants you to speak at the Veterans Equity Summit next week. They're offering a primetime slot." He rubbed his temples. "They want to make me the face of something, fix their image, take some heat off." She sat beside him. "Maybe, but maybe it's your moment, the one your mom always talked about." He looked at her, eyes tired but alive. "Then I'll do it, but I won't read their speech." That night, Marcus sat at the dinner table with Caleb. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said, picking at his mashed potatoes. "Always." "Why didn't you fight back?" Marcus leaned back. "Because power isn't always loud, and sometimes you win more by not giving people what they expect." Caleb thought for a moment. "You're still mad though, right?" Marcus smiled just a little. "Mad doesn't even begin to cover it, but I'm going to use it, that's the difference." At Precinct HQ, the walls were closing in. The mayor called for an investigation. Civil rights attorneys filed suit, and Officer Bradley sat in a windowless room with a legal pad, writing a personal statement of apology. that would later be read on national television. But Sergeant Crawford, he refused. They're making this a race thing, he spat to the local union rep. This is politics. That guy was smug, didn't answer my questions, thought he was better than me. The rep just shook his head. Bill, he is better than you, and now everyone knows it. At the Pentagon, Secretary Trask met privately with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He could retire tomorrow, the chairman said, and nobody would blame him. Trask folded her hands. He's not going to. You sure? I spoke to him this morning, she replied. He's not done, not yet. By Friday, the story had evolved from scandal to movement. Veterans posted photos in uniform with captions like, I am not a threat. Honor has no skin tone. Respect our service, everywhere. News anchors debated systemic policing. Civilian leaders called for reform. And across the country, Americans, black, white, military, civilian, rallied behind a man who had spent 3 decades serving quietly and was now being heard loudly. But in Marcus's heart, there was no celebration. Not yet. He knew this was just the beginning. And the real battle, it hadn't even started. The morning after the Pentagon statement dropped, Marcus Ellison woke up to his name trending in 5 countries. General Ellison, respect our vets. Justice for Marcus. Sawlak and brave. Salute not suspicion. Danielle sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her face unreadable. You've got people quoting you like scripture, she said, sliding the screen toward him. A tweet read, Power isn't always loud. That hit my soul. General Ellison is the voice we didn't know we needed. Marcus sipped his coffee slowly, watching the steam curl in the morning light. People don't know me. They know the idea of me. You think that's a bad thing, and I think ideas fade. People remember what you do. That day, Marcus received over 200 interview requests, from 60 Minutes to The Breakfast Club, from CNN to NPR. His military assistant, Captain Jada Hicks, a sharp young officer from Detroit, had to triage them like battlefield calls. Sir, there's a press team from the White House offering you a 5-minute prime spot on Sunday night, she said over the phone. They're even willing to script around your story. Marcus raised an eyebrow. They want to use me to calm people. Doubt? Yes, sir, he smirked. Tell them I don't calm, I clarify. Jada laughed before catching herself. Roger that. Meanwhile, the pressure inside City Hall was volcanic. Mayor Kendra Lopez, elected on a platform of police reform, was now being dragged for having appointed a police commissioner who hadn't fired Crawford immediately. The press kept circling. I don't care what the union says, she barked in an emergency meeting. If we don't act decisively, we lose every ounce of credibility. Suspend the commissioner if you have to. Her chief of staff leaned in. Ma'am, we've got activists planning to camp outside the precinct. The Ellison video turned this into Selma 2-0. Good, she said. Maybe then they'll listen. That night, Marcus finally sat down in front of a camera. Not for a TV network, not for the government, but for his people. He recorded the video himself, sitting in his study, the medals on the wall behind him but not in focus. No music, no filters, just him. And truth. I've served this country in 3 wars, led men and women into hell and back. I've stood in rooms with world leaders and briefed presidents, but none of that mattered when 2 cops saw a black man in a car. They thought he shouldn't drive. They didn't see my stars. They didn't see my service. They didn't see my soul. They saw a threat. And if that can happen to me, what happens to the 18-year-old kid just trying to make it home after work? We need more than hashtags. We need accountability. We need a reckoning. And if I have to be the face of that, so be it. He hit upload. Within 20 minutes, the video hit 3 million views. By morning, it had passed 10. While most of the world saw inspiration, Marcus felt unease. He wasn't trying to become a symbol. He had plans, a future promotion to the Joint Chiefs, a legacy inside the defense system. But now, he was a lightning rod. And lightning doesn't always strike upward. His phone buzzed. It was Colonel James Wexler, his old mentor. Still remember how to take a punch, soldier? Wexler asked. Marcus exhaled. Seems like I took one on every platform today. Good. That means you're standing for something real. You've got every young black service member looking at you right now, and every old white general asking themselves if they should have done more. There was a pause. Now the question is, Wexler continued, you going to be a story or a chapter? Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't need to, but not everyone was cheering. Inside a darkened boardroom across town, a small group of city power players met quietly. Police union reps, wealthy donors, strategic advisors, people who saw Marcus Ellison not as a patriot but as a problem. He's undermining public confidence in law enforcement, one said. He's turning the military against domestic agencies, another added. A third, more calculated voice said, he's got too much traction. He's clean, respected. And that scares the hell out of people. Then came the real question, what if we dig? Back at home, Danielle could feel the storm building. You realize what happens if you keep pushing, right? She asked. I do. They're going to come for you. They already did, Marcus said. This time I'm ready. The next morning, the New York Tribune dropped a front-page feature, General Ellison, the soldier, the standoff, the signal. It painted him as a man forged by discipline and burdened by dual loyalties to his country and to the truth. It ended with a quote from Marcus's speech. If a uniform can't protect me here, maybe it was never meant to. But I'm going to fight like it should. Across the country, people weren't just watching anymore, they were organizing. Marches in Atlanta, vigils in Baltimore, letters to Congress, veterans protesting in full-dress uniform outside local precincts. Marcus had become more than a man. He was now a mirror, and America didn't always like what it saw in it. The echo of polished boots on the Pentagon marble floor was something Marcus had grown used to over the years. But today each step felt heavier, weighted not by war but by politics, by optics, by enemies who didn't wear a different flag but dressed just like him. He stepped into the conference room where senior officials were already gathered. Advisors, in suits, generals with bars and ribbons, and a couple of civilians who didn't even bother to hide their discomfort at his presence. Eyes turned as he entered. A few offered stiff nods. Others barely looked up. General Whitmore, head of strategic operations, cleared his throat. General Ellison, he began, we appreciate you coming in. Obviously the last week has been turbulent. Marcus took a seat across the table, hands clasped in front of him. Turbulence happens when a system's under stress. Maybe we needed to shake the rust loose. A low murmur moved around the table. Whitmore tried to steer back to safety. There's concern, he said, that your media presence is becoming political. Marcus didn't flinch. My existence isn't political. Being handcuffed in uniform, that was political. Across the table, Admiral Jennings chimed in. You've lit a fire, Marcus, and you know as well as I do, the institution doesn't like fires. It should, Marcus replied, because maybe now it'll stop sleeping through the alarms. The room went still. Secretary Trask, seated at the head of the table, finally spoke. Her voice was calm but sharp. Let's be clear. General Ellison has every right to speak on what happened to him. The problem isn't that he's speaking. The problem is that what he's saying is true. Whitmore looked ready to argue. But Trask shut it down with a glance. She turned to Marcus. We're behind you, she said. But be careful, not everyone in this building wants change. Some want you silenced. Marcus nodded slowly. I've been quiet long enough. After the meeting, as he stepped out into the corridor, a low voice called out behind him. Sir, 1 second, it was Captain Hicks, his aide. She had a manila envelope in her hand, her face tense. This was slipped under my door last night, she said quietly. He took the envelope and opened it. Inside were photocopies, pages from a personnel file. His. But it wasn't the official version. This one was edited, redacted in strange places, lines highlighted to raise suspicion. A note was paperclipped to the top. Everyone has something to lose. Marcus stared at it for a long time. It was an old move. Discredit. Cast doubt. Make the public question whether the hero was ever real in the first place. Where did this come from, he asked. No idea, but someone's digging. Hard. Marcus clenched his jaw, remembering something his mother used to say. They'll love you until you remind them they built the house on sand. That night, Marcus and Danielle sat in the backyard, just them and the crickets. The air was thick, with spring heat, But he couldn't shake the cold settling in his chest. "They're going to come after everything," he said. "My record, my family, maybe even my sanity." Danielle leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then let them," she said softly. "You didn't start this, but you're damn well going to finish it." His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another message, another headline, another opinion, but he didn't check it. He sat there holding the hand of the woman who knew him before the stars, before the speeches, before the storm. Inside the precinct that had once cuffed him, things had changed. Officer Nate Bradley was now on administrative leave, not suspended but no longer working patrol. He sat in the locker room most days, staring at the wall, going over that night again and again. He'd watched the video over 100 times, knew the moment he should have spoken up, knew how he looked, silent, uncertain, complicit. It ate. Him alive. A knock on the metal locker snapped him back. "Internal Affairs wants you again," said a fellow officer, eyes blank. Bradley stood slowly. The shame was still there, but so was something else. Resolve. If he was going to be dragged through this, he was at least going to tell the whole truth. Across the city, whispers continued to spread. Old colleagues from Marcus's early years were being contacted. Some asked odd questions, ones that felt scripted, pushed, planted. The effort to dismantle his credibility wasn't subtle anymore. Danielle found a strange car parked outside their home late one night. When she approached, it sped off. The calls came next. Hang-ups, blocked numbers, passive threats. Marcus didn't report them. He recorded them, and he kept moving because he knew this wasn't just about him now. It was bigger. It was about every soldier who'd taken off the uniform and found themselves suddenly smaller in the eyes of the country they served. It was about Caleb, who still asked at night if cops would do to him what they did to his dad, and it was about a system terrified of what would happen if someone like Marcus didn't stay in his lane. Enemies didn't always wear different colors. Sometimes they saluted the same flag and feared the day someone called them out beneath it. But Marcus had faced worse, in deserts, on battlefields, in war rooms. He wasn't afraid of enemies in uniform. He was afraid of doing nothing, and that fear was long gone now. On Capitol Hill, the halls weren't silent. They never were. But now the whispers carried weight. Behind closed doors, under soft lighting and thicker than necessary security, deals were being made. Not about budgets, not about foreign threats, but about one man in uniform who'd become too big, too fast, and too loud. Senator Thomas Granger adjusted his cufflinks and leaned forward in his leather chair. "This Ellison thing's getting legs," he said, voice smooth like bourbon. "Every network, every classroom, hell, my granddaughter brought him up at Sunday dinner, asked me if we're the good guys." His aide, younger, more nervous, replied, "Sir, the Pentagon's backing him. Public opinion is—" Granger cut him off with a raised hand. "Public opinion is a wave. You ride it or you wait it out, but you never let it dictate the rules." Across town, Marcus stood in a sleek studio. Cameras swiveled around him, lights, soft but focused. He wore his uniform, but this time not to blend in. This time it was a declaration. "We're joined now by General Marcus Ellison," said the anchor, her tone reverent. "Sir, millions of Americans see you as a symbol now. What do you see when you look in the mirror?" Marcus didn't blink. "I see a man who kept quiet for 30 years, who believed service would protect him from the cracks in the system. I was wrong. The interview went viral within an hour. But while the public embraced his truth, the political machine began its churn. Old campaign donors called in favors. Lawmakers started framing the conversation not around justice, but around chain of command and military neutrality. Behind one particularly polished oak door, Senator Granger was speaking again, this time on the phone. "I want dirt," he said plainly. "I don't care how old, I don't care how minor. I want Ellison off the board before this becomes a referendum on all of us." The voice on the other end hesitated. "He's clean, Senator. I've seen his file. It's airtight." "Then, punch holes in it," Granger snapped. "I don't need truth, I need a headline." Meanwhile, Marcus returned home to find Caleb sitting on the living room floor, drawing with thick markers. He looked up, his smile warm, but a little dimmer these days. "Did they ask you hard questions again, Daddy?" Marcus knelt beside him. "Yeah, but I told the truth." Caleb paused, thinking hard. What if people don't like the truth? Marcus smoothed his son's hair. Then that's not your problem. Your job is to be the truth. Danielle watched from the kitchen, her heart caught between pride and fear. Every day Marcus stepped further into the storm, and every day the clouds got darker. At the Pentagon, Trask sat in a private intelligence briefing. The topic wasn't classified threats from overseas, it was internal. There's chatter on secure channels, said the analyst. Anonymous sources pushing a narrative that General Ellison once altered a report in Afghanistan. It's bogus, but it's getting traction in fringe media. Trask's eyes narrowed. Fringe media today is mainstream tomorrow, the analyst nodded. Someone's building a case, ma'am, manufactured or not. Back in the city, Officer Nate Bradley sat under the harsh light of an internal affairs interview. He was pale, sweating. I didn't know who he was, he repeated. But I knew what was happening. I froze. I didn't stop it. Why? Not? Asked the investigator. Bradley looked down at his hands. Because part of me thought it was normal. Just another stop. Just another black guy in a nice car, and that's the part that keeps me up at night. His statement would leak the next day, and it would explode, because finally someone from inside the force had said what everyone else tried to deny. It wasn't about one cop. It was the culture. As the pressure built, Marcus found himself summoned to a friendly breakfast with Senator Elaine Parker, a moderate Democrat who'd served on the Armed Services Committee for 12 years. She greeted him warmly, offered coffee, and got right to the point. You're inspiring people, General. But you're scaring them too, the ones who benefit from things staying broken? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Is this a warning? Parker shook her head. This is an offer. There are those on the Hill who want to stand with you. But we need a plan. We need to turn this momentum into legislation, into reform. We need your voice. But we also need your strategy. Marcus leaned back. I didn't plan to be a politician. You don't have to be, she said. You just have to be the man you've always been, in front of more people. That night, after Caleb had gone to bed, Marcus and Danielle sat out on the porch watching the wind shift the branches overhead. They're going to try to shut this down, she said. I know. They're going to twist your record, bait your anger, attack your integrity. I know, she looked over, eyes shining, but they don't know you. He smiled, the kind of smile forged in fire. Not yet. In Washington, the whispers turned to murmurs. In media rooms, the murmurs became headlines, and in the heart of America, something ancient stirred, an unwillingness to go back to silence, to shadows, to pretending. Marcus Ellison wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a reckoning, and the Hill. It was starting to shake. The news broke like a crack of thunder, loud, jarring, and completely calculated. General Marcus Ellison, linked to 2009 civilian casualty incident in Kandahar. It hit every major outlet at the same time, like clockwork. Headlines didn't question. They stated. Pundits didn't ask. They accused. And within hours, hashtags turned sharp. Hero or hazard trended alongside Dr. Ellison exposed. Marcus stood in the living room, staring at the flat screen, arms folded across his chest. Danielle was beside him, jaw tight. You told me this would happen, she said, but not like this. I didn't think they'd reach back that far, that deep. The footage was old, grainy, leaked, a burned-out village, locals screaming. The narrator's voiceover did all the damage. An operation led by then-Colonel Marcus Ellison resulted in civilian deaths, according to newly uncovered reports. What they didn't show were the facts, that the target was confirmed hostile, that Ellison had ordered a full evac of non-combatants, that the intelligence they'd used was vetted and confirmed 3 times over. But truth now was a distant. Second to spectacle, Caleb walked in, holding his tablet. Daddy, why is your face on YouTube? Someone said you hurt people. Danielle stepped in quickly, ushering him out. Go play, baby. Daddy's busy. Marcus turned away from the screen, not from shame, but from calculation. He picked up the phone and called Captain Hicks. I need every file from Kandahar, full logs, statements, satellite timestamps. Already on it, sir, she said without hesitation. But we've got another issue. What now? Someone leaked your security clearance file. Redacted, but still too damaging. Marcus closed his eyes. They're trying to drown me in smoke so nobody sees the fire. Back at the Pentagon, Trask slammed the manila folder down on the table in her office. Her intelligence chief flinched. Where? Did this leak come from? We think it's internal, someone high up. You think or you know? Silence. Trask leaned in. They're coming for one of our best, and if they succeed, what message does that send to every soldier of color in this country? He didn't respond. Find them or I will. Across the country, the blowback hit like shrapnel. At a local VFW in Missouri, veterans were shouting over beers. He made it all about race, one barked. Now look what he's hiding. You all forget that man carried half the damn war. On his back, another shot back. They smear folks like that because they scared. Online, the debate got uglier. Comments flooded in. Some called Marcus a traitor. Others called him a martyr. Some claimed he was a CIA puppet. Others insisted he was an angry black radical in a uniform. But amid the noise, a new video emerged. This one posted by Corporal Stephen Ray, a soldier who served with Marcus in Kandahar. He sat in his garage, wearing a faded hoodie and speaking directly into his phone. I was there in '09. We followed intel. We did our jobs. We protected that village. The only reason there weren't more casualties is because Ellison pulled us out early. He saved lives, including mine. You want to blame someone? Blame war. But don't blame him. The video went viral again. But Marcus knew the back and forth wouldn't stop. The press didn't care about resolution. They wanted fuel. He needed to change the game. That night, he called Senator Parker. I'm ready, he said. For what? To testify to Congress. On record. Parker exhaled like she'd been waiting to hear those words. You sure? It'll be brutal. I've survived worse. Danielle sat with him afterward, on the porch again, their quiet place slowly becoming a war room. You know they'll come for us next, she said. Me, Caleb, anyone who's ever loved you. Marcus reached over, took her hand. I'll protect you, but I won't retreat. She smiled, tired but proud. Then let's go forward. Meanwhile, in a locked office inside Capitol Hill, Senator Granger stood over a table of documents. He's going to testify, his aide said. They'll spin it like bravery, like leadership. Granger's jaw clenched. Then we make sure he bleeds in that chair. Back at home, Marcus prepared for battle. He shaved, ironed his uniform himself, ran his notes over and over until the pages felt like scripture. But it wasn't pride or legacy that pushed him now. It was Caleb. It was every black soldier who ever wondered if the uniform made them equal, or just made them a better target. He looked in the mirror one last time before heading out. They want to bury me, he whispered to his reflection. Let's make sure they do it with the truth. The hearing chamber in the Capitol was packed. Cameras lined the back walls, their red recording lights blinking like eyes waiting to devour. Journalists filled every seat not already occupied by suits, uniforms, and a few strategically placed, concerned citizens. The buzz in the room wasn't just anticipation, it was voltage. At the front sat the panel, senators flanked by aides, papers stacked like armor in front of them. Centered among them was Senator Granger, all polished charm and sharpened teeth. And then the doors opened. General Marcus Ellison entered in full-dress uniform, every ribbon earned, every star shining under the lights. The room shifted. It wasn't applause, but it wasn't indifference either. It was something deeper, gravity. He didn't just enter the room, he commanded it. Danielle and Caleb watched from the second row. Caleb's legs dangled off the chair, feet too short to touch the ground, but his eyes didn't leave his father. Marcus took his seat, adjusted the mic, and waited. Senator Parker began. General Ellison, we appreciate your presence here today. We understand the past few weeks have brought unwanted scrutiny to your service and personal life. Please know that Granger cut in. Let's not get sentimental, Senator. This is a fact-finding hearing, not a standing ovation. Marcus didn't flinch. Parker nodded. Then let's begin. General, can you walk us through the events? Solve your detainment by the local police. Marcus leaned forward, voice steady, strong. I was in uniform, driving my own vehicle, stopped without cause, detained without explanation. And when I identified myself, I was cuffed. No Miranda, no reasoning, just assumptions. Parker raised an eyebrow. And those assumptions were based on... Marcus locked eyes with her. My skin. A silence swept the room. Cameras zoomed. Granger scribbled something on his legal pad without looking up. Parker continued. "And your response after the incident? Was that planned?" "No, but it was necessary. I stayed quiet before. I believed the system would protect me. That, if I just served well enough, long enough, I wouldn't have to speak up. I was wrong." Granger looked up, smirking. "You've been very vocal since then, General. Some say too vocal. Are you using your uniform to push a political agenda?" Marcus turned toward him. "No, Senator. I'm using my voice to prevent another 10-year-old from asking his father if being black means he's a threat." Granger leaned back, arms crossed. "And what about Kandahar? Shall we discuss your command decision that allegedly led to civilian casualties?" Marcus didn't blink. "Let's." He reached into his folder and slid a document across the table. "This is the after-action report. Confirmed enemy compound. Intel verified 3 times. A risk, yes, but one the Pentagon greenlit. I've carried that day with me every hour since. But let's be clear, I made the call, and I stand by it. Because if I hadn't, more of my men would be dead." Senator Granger didn't pick up the report, but others did. Parker gave him the space to speak freely. "And the leaked file? The one accusing you of altering reports?" "Forged," Marcus replied. "Sloppy work, too. Cross-referenced it with the original. Whoever doctored it didn't know half the protocols. It was designed to smear, not reveal," Granger bristled. "Are you suggesting someone inside this government tried to discredit you?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm not suggesting, I'm stating. Someone's more afraid of my words than they ever were of my weapon." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Danielle reached over and squeezed Caleb's hand. The boy looked up, eyes, wide lips parted. His father had never looked taller. Parker leaned in. "So why keep speaking? After all the threats, the leaks, the attacks?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "Because silence is the armor they count on. Because I've buried men who fought for a country that didn't see them as equal. Because my son deserves a world where his last name is a legacy, not a liability." For a moment no one spoke. Granger glanced toward one of his aides, who subtly shook his head. "No more ammo." Parker closed her folder. "Thank you, General Ellison. Your service and your courage speak for themselves." The hearing adjourned. The room erupted, not in cheers but in motion. Journalists sprinted to file stories. Senators whispered, aides huddled. But Marcus, he just stood, turned, and walked toward the only 2 faces in the crowd that mattered. Caleb leapt into his arms. Danielle wrapped them both in hers. Proud. "Doesn't even cover it," she whispered. Later that evening, the clip of Marcus's testimony would circulate faster than even his arrest video. Veterans posted it. Celebrities reposted it. Everyday people, black, white, and everything in between, called it a turning point. But back inside a quiet office on the Hill, Granger made a call. "Plan A didn't work," he said coldly. "Move to Plan B." The air was thick with tension. In the Capitol office, the hum of activity outside muted by the closed door. Senator Granger leaned back in his chair, watching his staff scramble over the growing fallout of Marcus's testimony. He'd underestimated the man. The public's reaction was overwhelming. Marcus had emerged from the hearing stronger, more determined and more beloved. Granger couldn't allow that. "Move to Plan B." Granger's voice was low, the order given like a command. His senior aide, Michelle Ray, stood by the window, typing a message into her phone before looking back at him. "Are you sure about this, Senator? It's a dangerous play. If this backfires—" "It won't backfire," Granger interrupted, his voice sharp. "The man's a hero to the people, but heroes fall, Michelle, and they fall hard when their pride blinds them to their own weaknesses." Michelle nodded, her expression unreadable. She had her own agenda, one that was becoming more aligned with Granger's every day. "We'll need a good scapegoat," she said, her fingers tapping on the desk. "A scapegoat's already been chosen. The leak. The press already suspects. An insider. We'll confirm it." That night, Marcus sat at home reading through the stream of support messages, some from old soldiers, others from activists and civilians alike. But as he scrolled, his eyes were drawn to a single headline flashing across his phone. "General Marcus Ellison linked to military leak. Sources indicate inside job." His fingers tightened around the device. A tightness settled in his chest, a feeling he knew all too well. It was happening. They were framing him for the leaks. Danielle walked into the living room, her eyes narrowing at the phone in his hand. She had seen the same headline. "They're coming after you again," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This time they've got a story." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. His thoughts were already working overtime, calculating. The next step. Granger wasn't just a politician, he was a master of manipulation, and now they were targeting Marcus like a pawn in a high-stakes chess game. "They won't get away with it," Marcus finally said, looking up at Danielle. "I know how they work. They need a villain, and I'm it." Caleb came rushing in. From the hallway, holding a stuffed bear in his arms, his innocent wide eyes were fixated on Marcus. "Daddy, what's leak mean?" Caleb asked, sounding more confused than worried. Marcus knelt down to his son's level, ruffling his hair gently. "It's a word used when someone tells secrets they're not supposed to. But don't worry, baby, I'll fix it." Danielle gave him a look, one of those looks that said, "You'd better." Meanwhile, Senator Granger was watching from the shadows. His sources had worked fast. The timing couldn't have been better. The leak accusation was too easy to sell to the press, too clean to dismiss. He had his next move all planned. The next morning, the leak story exploded into full-scale warfare. General Ellison under investigation for leaking classified information. Feds involved. A new batch of documents was released. Fake, of course, but convincing enough to take down a man like Marcus. They claimed Marcus had been in contact with unknown foreign agents before the Kandahar incident, a theory that sounded just plausible enough to fit the narrative. Within hours, the story was on every news channel, every social media feed. The hashtag #JoshEllisonLeak trended nationwide. Marcus wasn't just a fallen hero now, he was a traitor. Inside the Pentagon, Captain Hicks was watching the chaos unfold, in real time. She knew something was off. Marcus had been at the center of high-level ops for years. He wouldn't have been sloppy with security. She picked up her phone and dialed. "General, we need to talk." That afternoon, Marcus stood in front of his team. They had gathered quickly after the media storm broke. Everyone was on edge. Everyone was waiting for him to say something, to tell them what the hell was going on. "The leak they're accusing me of," Marcus started, his voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside him. "It's a setup. They know exactly what they're doing." A murmur rippled through the group. "What makes you so sure?" asked Lieutenant Carson, his voice tense. "Because they need a fall guy, and they're going to use the story to push me out, make me look like I betrayed everything I stood for." Captain Hicks stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "Who's behind it?" Granger's face flashed in Marcus's mind. He didn't have concrete proof, but he knew. He knew. "We'll find out," Marcus said, "but I need your help. If you trust me, and I trust you, then we've got to get ahead of this, before they destroy everything." The room was silent for a moment. Then Carson spoke up again. "We're with you, sir. Always." Marcus looked at the faces of his team, the ones who had fought alongside him in the heat of battle. Their loyalty wasn't blind. It was earned. Later that night, Marcus met with Senator Parker in a private office. "I need your help," he said without preamble. Parker raised an eyebrow. "You want me to save your career? It's a little late for that. I want you to expose the truth. Help me go on the offensive before this kills my reputation and everything I've worked for." She studied him carefully, then sighed. "Fine, but it's not just your name we're defending now. You understand that, right?" "I do." Parker leaned forward. "Then let's turn the tables." The next morning, Granger stood in front of a microphone, preparing for a press conference that would solidify his control over the narrative. But Marcus wasn't going to let that happen. Marcus had already launched an investigation of his own, and it was about to expose the dirty secrets Granger thought were buried. The Capitol had been buzzing non-stop since the leak allegations against Marcus hit the press. Senators, journalists, and insiders alike crowded around their phones and laptops trying to make sense of it all. But as Granger's media team continued to stoke the fire, Marcus's camp was quietly preparing their own counterattack. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. This was about exposing the corruption, the manipulation and the lies. Lies that ran deep into the political machine that had been trying to tear him down. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, phone pressed to his ear. Across the room, Danielle stood by the window, her arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold on TV. A new batch of leaks, all cleverly designed to paint him as a traitor, had hit the wire. It was relentless. He glanced at Danielle, then back at the phone. "I need the proof, Captain. The intel you promised. They're framing me, and we don't have much time." On the other end, Captain Hicks responded with unwavering confidence. "It's coming, sir. But this isn't just about you anymore. There are people with a vested interest in making sure this goes deeper than just a simple smear campaign." Marcus's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "There's a bigger game at play here. And trust me, the people behind this don't care if you go down. They'll burn the entire system if it means getting rid of you." Meanwhile, Senator Granger was basking in the fallout. His press conference had been a success. The accusations against Marcus had spread like wildfire. But his victory felt hollow. The backlash was coming. He could feel it in the air. He sat in his office, watching a live feed of Marcus's legal team preparing to fight back in the press. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Granger wasn't ready to let the general off that easily, but the storm that was about to hit him would be one he couldn't control. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was Senator Parker. He answered quickly. "You ready to flip the script?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. "I'm not here to play games, Parker," Marcus responded, his voice tight with purpose. "What do you have?" "I've got someone who's willing to talk, someone who can confirm everything you've been saying, but they need protection. If we want the truth out, we have to be prepared for the storm it's going to bring." "Then let's bring the storm." Back in the Capitol, the media frenzy was reaching a boiling point. News anchors debated, pundits pontificated, and every corner of Washington was alive with the story of Marcus's fall from grace. But for every article that smeared his name, a new one was popping up, calling for a closer look at the investigation. People were starting to ask questions. Marcus's supporters began to rally. Online petitions circulated. Veterans organizations put out statements of support. Everyday Americans took to social media, demanding a fair investigation. What was once a quiet smear campaign was now an all-out war. At the heart of the storm was Marcus himself, quiet, determined, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The moment came sooner than expected. Early the next morning, Captain Hicks arrived at a discreet location. The intel was in. She held a small encrypted drive, one that could change everything. Marcus met her in the parking garage. The streets above were quiet, eerily so. They spoke in low tones, their words heavy with the weight of everything at stake. "Here it is," Hicks said, handing him the drive. "The full records on Granger's operation, all the communications, everything. They've been working this angle for months. It wasn't just about you. It's about a deeper power grab." Marcus's hands gripped the drive tightly. "You're sure this is solid?" "Absolutely. If we release this, we will," Marcus interrupted, his voice hard. "But not until the world is watching, not until we've got the attention of everyone in the Senate." Hicks nodded, understanding. "You've got it. But you know this won't be easy. They won't just sit back and let us take the lid off this. They never do. But it's time they learned we're not playing their game anymore." Back at the Capitol, the air felt thick with anticipation. Granger was already preparing his next move, and Marcus knew it wouldn't be long before the next wave of attacks came. But this time, Marcus was ready. He and Danielle stood side by side, the weight of everything ahead of them pressing down. The kids were already asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. But Marcus couldn't afford to think about that now. He had to think of the bigger picture. He had to think of his country. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," Danielle said, looking up at him with fierce determination. "Always," he replied. "Always." The moment was shattered by a loud knock on the door. Marcus opened it to find a journalist holding a small tablet. "You need to see this." He followed the journalist into the living room, where the screen flashed with a breaking news headline: "General Marcus Ellison exonerated. New evidence shows military leak. Was an inside job." The camera zoomed out, to reveal a Pentagon press release confirming that the leaked documents were indeed falsified, and an internal investigation was underway. The Pentagon also announced that a full investigation into Granger's office would be launched. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. They were coming for Granger now. The aftermath of the Pentagon's announcement spread like wildfire. Within hours, Marcus's exoneration was the top story across the country. For the first time in days, the mood shifted. People began to see the corruption that had been festering behind the scenes. The ones who had tried to tear Marcus down weren't invincible. However, the battle was far from over. Granger's people didn't take defeat lightly. It wasn't just his career at stake, it was his network, his power. They would push back, and they would push hard. Marcus sat in his study, staring at the massive stack of legal papers in front of him. Danielle sat beside him, her fingers drumming nervously on the armrest of her chair. The door to the study was closed, the only light coming from a single desk lamp that cast long shadows on the walls. "So what now?" Danielle asked, her voice low but clear. "Now," Marcus replied, leaning forward and pressing his hands against his face. "Now we hit them back." Marcus didn't just want to clear his name. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about exposing the full extent of the corruption. Granger wasn't the only one involved. The entire power structure behind him needed to be dismantled, and it would take more than just Marcus's fight to get it done. The media storm had calmed for a moment, but Marcus knew better than to think that meant the war was over. Granger's side would go on the offensive, and they would do it with everything they had. Senator Granger wasn't one to go down quietly. In the days following Marcus's exoneration, he'd retreated into the shadows, pulling strings from behind closed doors. The Senate hearings that were supposed to be a victory for Marcus were now a battleground for survival. Granger's team was working overtime to discredit Marcus and turn public opinion back in their favor. In a meeting with his closest allies, Granger slammed his fist on the table. "I don't care what it takes, we are going to destroy him. This is bigger than just a personal vendetta. This is about control. We can't let him win, Michelle." Ray, his senior aide, looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and calculation. "Senator, they'll keep coming for you too. The media won't let this go. If we don't control the narrative, we lose." Granger's face twisted into a sneer. "Then we take the fight to them. We use the truth against him. We make Marcus look like the liar he is. If the Pentagon was involved in clearing his name, there's something bigger at play here. We make them expose themselves." Meanwhile, Marcus wasn't waiting around for Granger to make the next move. He had been working with his team and a few trusted allies in Congress to prepare for the next phase. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about uncovering the networks of power that operated just beyond the reach of the public eye. He had the evidence now, the files from Hicks, the confirmed leaks about Granger's dealings. But there was still more to be done. He couldn't release everything just yet. He had to move carefully, strategically. Senator Parker, the one ally Marcus trusted the most in Washington, had become his lifeline. They had been in constant communication, over the last few days, working behind the scenes to gather the final pieces of the puzzle. "You need to go public with everything you've got," Parker told Marcus one evening, her voice resolute. "But we have to make sure the right people are ready to back you up, otherwise they'll bury you." "I know," Marcus replied, his mind working fast, "but we can't just drop everything at once. It has to be surgical. If we want to take Granger down, we need to do it in stages. We can't give him time to regroup." As the days passed, Marcus's legal team filed a formal petition for an official investigation into Granger's ties to illegal lobbying and military leaks. They had already amassed an impressive amount of evidence, but now it was time to take it to the public. The pressure was mounting, and just when Marcus thought he had a brief moment of calm, Granger's office unleashed the next round of attacks. The headlines exploded. General Marcus Ellison's history of mismanagement exposed. Thousands of military dollars unaccounted for. The story came from an anonymous source within the Pentagon, someone with insider access. Granger's camp had found a way to turn the tide, shifting the narrative from the leak scandal to accusing Marcus of corruption within the military itself. The public was eating it up. The media was quick to latch on, reporting new allegations about Marcus's past deployments, questioning his judgment and decision-making. The more they dug, the more the story seemed to grow. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing. A message from Danielle. "We need to talk, it's bad." He sat up in bed, his mind racing. He dialed her number, pacing across the room as the phone rang. "What's going on?" he asked when she answered. "It's a full-scale attack now," Danielle said, her voice tense. "They're framing you again, Marcus. This time they've got the public questioning your integrity. The story's already spreading." "I know. I've seen it. But I'm not backing down." "You need to act fast," she said, her tone urgent. "They've already started to rally the troops. Granger's supporters are out in full force, trying to build a case for your removal. It wasn't just the press anymore, it was the politicians and military figures Marcus once called allies. They were using their influence to erode his credibility, digging into his past, picking apart every decision he'd made, every operation he'd led. But Marcus wasn't about to sit back and watch his reputation crumble. This was personal now. He wasn't just fighting for his name, he was fighting for the very principles he had spent his life defending. He picked up the encrypted drive again, the one with the final set of documents. It was time to release the full truth, no matter the consequences. He called Captain Hicks once more. "Get the media contacts ready. We're going to make sure they know who Granger really is." "Are you sure about this?" Hicks asked, her voice full of resolve. "This could be the tipping point. It's time to take the fight to them. Once we expose Granger for what he is, we'll see who's left standing." As Marcus prepared to make the next move, he knew the stakes had never been higher. The truth would come out, but the question was, would he be the one to survive it? The war had only just begun. Marcus sat at his desk, staring at the encrypted drive in front of him. It was time. The final piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. For weeks he'd been strategizing, building alliances and carefully planning his next move. But now the moment had arrived to take everything public. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was palpable. Danielle walked into the study, her face taut with anxiety. She hadn't said much all morning, but it was clear that the weight of what they were about to do was settling on both of them. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "Once we hit send, there's no turning back." Marcus looked at her, his expression hard but resolute. "I've been through too much to back down now. The truth needs to be out there. Granger and his cronies have to be held accountable for what they've done." "I know you're right," she said quietly, sitting down next to him. "But the media will tear us apart. It's not just Granger anymore. You'll be up against the full weight of the system." "I'm not afraid of them," Marcus said, firmly. He pressed his hands together, his fingers interlocking as he stared at the screen. "I'm afraid of letting the people who trusted me down." The encrypted drive contained everything. Documents, photographs, wiretap transcripts, all the evidence that tied Senator Granger to the illegal lobbying network, the military leaks, and the shady dealings that had led to Marcus's wrongful arrest. There were also recordings of conversations that no one should have ever heard. But the truth was powerful, and Marcus knew it had to be exposed. The goal was simple: dismantle Granger's empire and clear his own name. But he knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be fallout. There always was. Marcus hit the key on the keyboard, uploading the files to a secure website. The media would be able to access everything, every scrap of evidence they needed to take Granger down. He took a deep breath as he watched the screen flash with a confirmation message. The truth was out there. The world would know. Meanwhile, Senator Granger was preparing for his own battle. His office was a whirlwind of activity, as his team scrambled to prepare for the inevitable backlash. He had expected Marcus to retaliate, but he hadn't expected this. The attack was swift, precise and undeniable. The evidence was devastating. Granger's face twisted into a grimace as he read the files. The documents were damning: his ties to illegal lobbyists, the influence he had over key military decisions, the leaks that had endangered countless lives. He could feel his grip on power slipping away. "Do you think this will be the end of me?" Granger sneered at Michelle Ray, who had been standing by his side as he read the files. "Senator, it's bad," she replied, her voice laced with concern. The media's already picking up the story. If this goes public, we'll have a full-blown scandal on our hands. Granger slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the contents. I'll destroy him. This is just another attempt to take me down. We can still control this. Marcus had no illusions about what would come next. Granger would strike back. He'd use every ounce of his power to silence Marcus and anyone who stood with him. But Marcus wasn't backing down. The public was already on his side, and now that the truth was out, the tide was turning. The first wave of media coverage hit hard. Headlines screamed accusations about Granger's corruption. Investigative reporters began sifting through the documents Marcus had released, and it didn't take long before they connected the dots. The story went viral, spreading across every major news network. Senator Granger's corruption exposed, Pentagon leaks, illegal lobbying, and more. The article went live at noon, and within minutes, social media erupted. People were outraged, and the calls for Granger's resignation started rolling in. The weight of the truth was more than he could handle. Granger's supporters, once loyal, began to waver. Senators who had previously turned a blind eye to his actions were now forced to distance themselves. The public outcry was deafening. That evening, Marcus watched the news in his living room, his gaze fixed on the television screen. He saw Granger's face for the first time since the story broke. The senator had given a press conference, his face pale and tight with anger. But the usual confidence in his voice was gone. The damage was done. "This is a political hit job," Granger was saying, trying to salvage his reputation. "These allegations are baseless, and I will fight back against these lies. I will prove that I am innocent." But Marcus could see through the charade. The cracks in Granger's armor were too wide to fix. The truth was out, and no amount of damage control could put the pieces back together. As the days passed, the pressure on Granger mounted. Public opinion turned against him, and his colleagues in the Senate began to call for an official investigation. The momentum was shifting in Marcus's favor. But the fight wasn't over yet. Granger's allies in the military-industrial complex were mobilizing, determined to protect their own interests. The battle was now about more than just a corrupt senator. It was about an entire system that was rotten to its core. Marcus sat down with Danielle in their living room late that night, both of them exhausted but resolute. The war wasn't won yet, but it was close. Granger was on the ropes, and they both knew it. "Marcus, we've done everything we can," Danielle said, her voice weary but proud. "The truth is out. Now it's time for the system to decide." "What happens next?" Marcus nodded. He'd spent years fighting for justice, and he wasn't about to stop now. The final push had begun, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. The investigation into Granger's dealings had only just begun, but Marcus knew the endgame was in sight. He could feel the momentum shifting, and this time, the power was in his hands. But there was still one final hurdle. The people in power wouldn't give up without a fight. Marcus had made enemies, and they wouldn't rest until he was destroyed. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had fought too long and too hard to back down now. The tension in Washington was palpable. The news cycle was dominated by the scandal surrounding Senator Granger, and Marcus had become an unlikely hero in the eyes of the public. But he knew that heroes had a way of becoming targets when the stakes were high. It wasn't just about public opinion anymore. Granger and his allies had taken the gloves off, and the fight was about to get ugly. Marcus sat in his office, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. His phone rang, and he glanced at the screen. It was a blocked number. He hesitated but answered. "Marcus, we need to talk," a voice said on the other end. It was David, an old contact from the Pentagon who had been feeding Marcus intel over the past few months. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, sitting up straighter. He could sense the urgency in David's tone. "They're coming after you," David replied, his voice low. "Granger's people have put a target on your back. It's not just political anymore. They've got the resources to make your life a living hell." Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling the familiar pressure building. He had known this was coming, but hearing it made it all too real. "What do you suggest?" "You need to go underground for a while," David advised. "Get out of the city. Let things cool off before they pull any more dirty tricks." Marcus thought for a moment. He didn't want to run, but he understood the stakes. The last thing he wanted was to become a martyr before finishing what he started. "All right, I'll be in touch," Marcus said, hanging up the phone. Danielle entered the office a few minutes later, her face filled with concern. "Who was that?" Marcus stood and turned toward her. "David from the Pentagon. Granger's playing for keeps now. He's pulling all the strings and they're coming after me." Danielle's face paled. "What do we do?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm going to lay low for a while. We'll move out of the city and wait for this to blow over. But trust me, this fight isn't over. I'm not going to let Granger win." The following days were a blur of preparation. Marcus and Danielle packed up their lives, leaving behind the home that had once felt safe. They drove through winding back roads, avoiding major highways. The city felt like a distant memory as they headed toward a small cabin in the mountains, a place where they could regroup, plan, and make their next move. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Senator Granger was growing desperate. His empire was crumbling, and he could feel the noose tightening around his neck. Public support was slipping away, and the Senate had begun to investigate his dealings more seriously. The media was relentless, and every day brought more revelations from Marcus's leaked documents. In the privacy of his office, Granger met with Michelle Ray, his most trusted ally, to discuss their next steps. "We've got to stop Marcus before he completely dismantles everything we've worked for," Granger said, pacing back and forth. "We need to discredit him, turn the media against him, and do whatever it takes to silence him." Michelle nodded, her face set in determination. "We have the resources, Senator. We can't afford to play nice anymore. We'll use every tool at our disposal to bury him." Granger stopped pacing and looked at her. "What about his family? We know where he's hiding." Michelle's eyes flickered for a moment, but she didn't hesitate. "We can use them to get to him. His weakness is his people. If we hurt them, we'll have him cornered." Back at Dewey, the cabin, Marcus and Danielle had started to settle into their temporary life in isolation. The world felt far away, and for a brief moment Marcus allowed himself to relax. But the looming danger was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. He couldn't afford to get too comfortable. One evening, as they sat outside on the porch, the wind rustling through the trees, Danielle broke the silence. "Marcus, are we really doing the right thing? I mean, we're out here, hiding from everything. It feels like we're running away." Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. "We're not running. We're just waiting for the right moment to strike. Granger's not going to get away with what he's done. He might think he's winning now, but we've got the truth on our side." She nodded, but her face was etched with doubt. "I just don't want to lose you." Marcus reached out, taking her hand in his. "You won't lose me, I promise you that." Days turned into weeks, and the world outside continued to churn. The investigation into Granger's corruption deepened, and the Senate's hearings began. The media covered every twist and turn, and public outrage grew louder with each passing day. But as the pressure mounted, Granger's tactics grew more extreme. Granger was a man who would stop at nothing to hold on to his power. His allies in the military-industrial complex were prepared to do whatever it took to protect their interests. They had begun to mobilize, putting pressure on key players in the Senate, and even using covert means to discredit Marcus. It wasn't long before whispers of a more personal attack began to surface. Marcus was jolted awake one night by a phone call. He groggily picked up the phone, his heart pounding in his chest. "Marcus, you need to listen to me," David's voice came through, the line sharp and urgent. "So they're going after your family. Granger's people know where they are. You need to get them out of there now." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What? How do you know?" "I've got eyes on the ground," David replied, his voice grim. "They're moving in. You don't have much time." Marcus quickly got up and shook Danielle awake. "Pack your things. We're leaving now." The next few hours were a blur of panic and adrenaline. Marcus and Danielle rushed to gather their belongings, knowing they had no time to waste. They didn't know exactly what Granger's people were planning, but they couldn't afford to take any chances. As they drove through the night, Marcus's mind raced. Granger had crossed the line. He was no longer just a corrupt politician. He was a threat to everyone Marcus cared about. And now, it was personal. As the car sped toward safety, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from David. "They've hit your family. Get back to Washington fast." The air in Washington was thick with tension. Marcus had returned to the city, but it wasn't the place he had left weeks ago. Everything had changed. Granger's forces were on high alert, and every step Marcus took felt like he was walking a tightrope, one misstep away from falling into a trap. He couldn't waste time. His family was in danger, and his enemies had become more ruthless with every passing day. It was clear that the game had reached its tipping point. If Marcus wanted to win, he would have to play dirty. He'd have to fight fire with fire. Danielle sat beside him in the car as they sped toward an underground safe house. She was quiet, her face pale from the weight of the situation. Marcus glanced at her as they made their way through the city, the glowing lights of Washington blurring past. "Them, you okay?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Danielle didn't answer immediately. She was staring out the window, her mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, she turned to him. "Do you really think we can take down Granger? He's got the system behind him. He's untouchable." Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. He had heard this doubt before, but this time it felt different. Granger's influence ran deep, and Marcus knew that dismantling the senator's empire wasn't going to be easy. But he couldn't back down, not now. "We don't need to take him down," Marcus said, his voice hardening with determination. "We just need to make him scared. Scared enough that he'll expose himself. Once we do that, the public will take care of the rest." The safe house. The safe house was located in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of the city. A nondescript house, it blended in with the rest of the neighborhood, its modest appearance offering the perfect cover. But inside it was fortified. Surveillance equipment, hidden exits, and panic rooms. It was the last place anyone would expect Marcus to be. They entered the house quickly, and Marcus immediately went to his phone, tapping in a code to connect with David. "I'm back," Marcus said when David picked up. "Good. Stay off the radar," David warned. "Granger's people have already been looking for you. They've got eyes everywhere. You need to move carefully." "I know," Marcus replied. "What's the latest?" David paused before responding. "It's bad. Granger's got enough dirt on the key players in Congress to make sure no one moves against him. The media's still buzzing about the corruption scandal, but he's managed to deflect attention, using his connections in the Pentagon to keep any serious charges at bay. Right now he's planning something big." Marcus's jaw clenched. Granger had always been good at playing the game, but Marcus had his own cards to play. He just needed to get the right information into the right hands. "I need to know everything you've got on him," Marcus said. "I'll expose him in ways he never saw coming." The leak. The night was silent, save for the hum of the city outside. Marcus sat at a desk in the safe house, his laptop open in front of him. He was deep in the files that David had sent. Everything. From campaign donations to secret meetings with corporate executives. The more he uncovered, the more the full extent of Granger's corruption became clear. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, and Granger was willing to do anything to hold on to it. But Marcus needed more. A bombshell, something that would make Granger's allies think twice before continuing to support him. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was an anonymous text message. "We know where your family is. Come alone if you want them back." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He immediately showed the message to Danielle, her face going pale as she read the words. "Marcus," she began, her voice shaking. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on him. He had no choice but to confront this head-on. If Granger thought he could intimidate Marcus by threatening his family, he was about to learn a hard lesson. "I'm going to make him regret ever getting involved in this," Marcus said, his voice steely. "We'll play his game, but on our terms." The plan the following morning, Marcus convened with his most trusted allies. Danielle, David, and a few close friends who had been helping him all along gathered in the safe house. The walls were lined with maps and intel, each person studying their role in the upcoming confrontation. David was the first to speak. "Granger doesn't want a war, Marcus. He's not going to go public with this because it would destroy him. But if you press him too hard, he'll fight back in ways you can't predict." "I know," Marcus said, nodding. "But he's already crossed the line. He's threatening my family now. That's something I won't allow." David sighed. "We've got the evidence, but to get it to the right people, we'll have to go to war. And that's not something you can take back once you've started." Marcus met David's gaze. I'm not backing down. We expose Granger and we take him down. But we do it smart. No one can know we're behind this. If Granger suspects I'm still alive, everything goes to hell. David considered this for a moment. All right, I'll start setting up the leak. We'll send it to the press, but make sure it lands at the right time. A slow burn. Granger won't be able to recover from it. Danielle spoke up. And what about your family? How do we protect them while you go after him? Marcus's expression softened, but his resolve never wavered. We'll use the safe house as a backup. They'll be safe here, but we're moving them as soon as we can. I'll deal with Granger and his goons. They won't know what hit them. The showdown begins. Later that day, Marcus stood outside overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the buildings below. He could feel the weight of the decision he had made. The consequences were inevitable. Granger would come after him with everything he had, but Marcus wasn't afraid. He had nothing left to lose. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about making sure that a man like Granger never had the power to destroy lives again. This fight was bigger than Marcus now. It was about changing the system. And no matter how hard Granger fought, Marcus was going to make sure the truth came out. The tension in the air was palpable. Marcus had spent days meticulously planning every move, each decision leading him closer to the moment of reckoning. The clock was ticking, and Granger's empire was on the verge of collapse. But Marcus knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about him. This was about taking down the system that had allowed men like Granger to thrive unchecked for far too long. He sat alone in the dimly lit room of the safe house, the only sound the tapping of his fingers on the table. The plan was set. He'd given David the final pieces of evidence, and the leak was scheduled to go live within hours. There would be no turning back now. Danielle's return. Just as Marcus was gathering his thoughts, Danielle entered the room, her face flushed. From running up the stairs. Marcus, she said, her voice urgent, there's something you need to see. The media's already caught wind of the leak. The press is scrambling for confirmation, and Granger's people are already on damage. Control. Marcus stood up, his heart racing. We can't wait any longer. They'll come for us if we don't move now. Danielle hesitated. You know this could escalate quickly. If we push too hard, it might backfire. I know, Marcus replied, meeting her gaze. But this is the moment. I've spent too long waiting. Granger doesn't get to win. The leak goes live. Marcus and Danielle watched the live coverage as news stations flashed headlines. The scandal involving Granger had exploded across every platform. The leak, a detailed report of Granger's involvement in orchestrating illegal arms deals, corporate kickbacks, and exploiting his position for personal gain, was out in the open. It was the kind of story that could topple a political dynasty, and Granger had no way of controlling it now. The first signs of panic were already evident. Granger's spokesperson issued a statement, denying everything, calling it a political smear, but the damage had been done. The media had their hooks in, and now there was no escape. The phone call an hour later, Marcus's phone rang. It was a blocked number. He didn't hesitate. He answered. Marcus, a gravelly voice said on the other end. It was Granger. You think you can take me down with a few leaked files? Granger's voice dripped with disdain. You've made a grave mistake. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. So the mistake was yours, Granger. You thought you could get away with everything. But you're about to find out that power doesn't last forever. You don't know what you're up against, Granger growled. I have people everywhere, everywhere. You turn, there are eyes. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm not scared of you, Marcus said, his voice colder than ever. The truth is already out. It's only a matter of time before your empire crumbles. This is your end, Granger. You've been exposed. There was a long pause, then Granger spoke again, this time with more venom. You've crossed a line you can't come back from, Marcus. The people you care about, they'll suffer for your mistakes. The line went dead. The first strike before Marcus could even process the threat. The sound of sirens filled the air outside. His heart sank. He knew it was only a matter of time before Granger's goons tried to take matters into their own hands. The safe house wasn't safe anymore. Danielle, we need to move, Marcus said urgently, grabbing his jacket and heading for the back door. We can't just run, Marcus. she protested, grabbing his arm. "We can't leave everything behind now. We've come too far." "We don't have a choice," he said, his voice sharp. "Granger won't stop until we're all dead. We have to make sure he knows we're not backing down." Danielle reluctantly nodded, but she was scared. Marcus could see it in her eyes. He had to do this, not just for himself, but for her, for their future. If they didn't stop Granger now, it would be too late. A deadly chase. The two of them sprinted through the backyard, moving quickly through the alleyways to avoid detection. They had planned this escape route in advance, but the urgency was unlike anything Marcus had ever felt. Every step was calculated, but fear gnawed at his insides. Was it too late to escape? Had Granger already anticipated this? As they reached the car, a series of gunshots rang out from behind. Marcus spun around, pulling Danielle to the ground as a bullet lodged in the metal frame of the car. His pulse raced as he pulled his gun from its holster. He could hear footsteps approaching. Granger's men were closing in. "Get in the car!" he barked at Danielle, his voice filled with urgency. Danielle fumbled with the door, her hands shaking. "Marcus, now!" he yelled, pushing her inside. The sound of more shots echoed through the alley as Marcus jumped into the driver's seat. He slammed the car into gear, speeding away from the danger. The tires screeched as they tore through the streets, narrowly avoiding a roadblock set up just a few blocks away. They had to lose the tail. Granger's men were relentless. The final decision as they raced through the city. Marcus's mind raced. He knew they couldn't keep running. Granger wouldn't stop until they were dead, and Marcus had no intention of letting him get away with this. The only option left was to finish what they had started. "We need to hit Granger hard, Danielle," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I know where he's keeping his most valuable information. It's time to take it all down." Danielle looked at him, eyes wide. "But if we do that, if we go after him directly, it'll be over for both of us." Marcus nodded. "It's the only way. We're in too deep now." With that, he turned the car toward the last place he needed to go, the final confrontation with Granger's power. If he succeeded, it would mean victory. If he failed, it would be the end. There was no other option. The night was thick with tension as Marcus and Danielle arrived at the final location, the one place they had been avoiding but could no longer run from. The imposing high-rise that belonged to Granger's private interests was dark, but Marcus knew that it was only the calm before the storm. Inside those walls were the final pieces of the puzzle, Granger's dirty dealings, the evidence they needed to bring him to his knees. "Are you sure about this?" Danielle asked, her voice low, filled with unease. Marcus turned to her, his face hard with resolve. "We've come too far. This ends tonight." Breaking in, the elevator door creaked open and they stepped into the cold marble-floored lobby. The building, though luxurious, felt ominous now. Every step they took echoed, reminding them how close they were to their goal and to danger. Their mission was clear: access Granger's private files stored in the penthouse suite at the top of the building. The server room, hidden behind a nondescript door that only a few trusted individuals knew about, was their target. If they could crack it, they could expose everything. But Marcus knew they didn't have much time. Granger's men would be on to them soon. Marcus led the way, his body taut with readiness, the gun at his side a constant reminder of what was at stake. Danielle stayed close behind him, her nerves obvious, but she refused to be left behind. There was no going back now. They reached the stairwell and moved up quickly, their breathing quickening as each floor passed. Marcus's mind raced, calculating every potential outcome. At the top, the server room was hidden behind a reinforced door that required a special key code, a key code that Marcus had, courtesy of a well-placed ally in Granger's inner circle. "Ready?" Marcus whispered. Danielle nodded, her face pale but determined. The files Marcus input the code. The lock disengaged, with a faint click, and the door swung open, revealing rows upon rows of hard drives and servers stacked in neat rows. The room was bathed in the glow of cold white light, but Marcus had no time to appreciate the sterile order. He moved swiftly to the terminal, his fingers flying over the keyboard, bypassing security protocols and decrypting files with practiced ease. His heart raced as each folder opened, revealing a treasure trove of illegal contracts, payoffs, and damning evidence of Granger's decades-long corruption. "Got it," Marcus muttered. He plugged in the flash drive that would carry the files, every last one of Granger's secrets, straight to the world. This is it. This is what will bring him down. Danielle stood by the door, eyes darting around nervously. "We need to go. Now." The confrontation. Just as the final file copied over, the lights in the server room flickered. Marcus froze. He looked up, eyes narrowing. He could hear the sound of boots hitting the marble floors, rapid footsteps echoing from the hallway. "They're here," Marcus said, his voice tight. Without hesitation, he grabbed Danielle's arm, pulling her towards the exit. But before they could make it out of the room, the door slammed open with a resounding crash. Two of Granger's men stood there, their guns drawn. "Marcus Walker," one of the men growled, his voice cold. "You've made a big mistake." Danielle gasped, but Marcus didn't flinch. "You're too late," he said, his voice ice-cold. "It's already over." A deadly standoff. The man with the gun stepped forward, his finger twitching on the trigger. "You don't get to walk away. Marcus, not after everything you've done." Marcus took a step back, his hand inching towards the gun at his side. "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," the man replied. Time seemed to slow as Marcus's mind raced, calculating his options. The gunfight was inevitable. There was no escape, no way out unless they fought their way through. But he wasn't alone. Danielle's eyes locked with his, and without a word, she made her decision. In a flash, Danielle grabbed the fire extinguisher off the wall, swinging it with all her strength. The first man barely had time to react before the blunt force struck him in the face. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The second man didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot missed by inches, slamming into the wall behind Marcus, with a speed. Born of desperation, Marcus drew his gun and fired twice. The man dropped, his weapon falling to the ground. Escape. Plan Marcus didn't look back. He grabbed the flash drive from the desk and motioned for Danielle to follow him. They dashed for the elevator, but as the doors opened, Marcus saw more of Granger's men waiting for them. There was no way through. "Back!" Marcus shouted. They ran in the opposite direction, heading for the stairwell. As they descended, they could hear the footsteps of their pursuers above them. The sound of their breath in the stairwell mingled with the rush of adrenaline coursing through their veins. But Marcus knew it wasn't over yet. They had the evidence. The world would know the truth about Granger's corruption, but now they had to get it to the people who could make the arrest. Suddenly, a siren screamed to life in the distance, blaring, growing louder. It was time to put the final plan into motion. The world watches. By the time they reached the ground floor, the police were already surrounding the building. The news helicopters hovered overhead, their searchlights casting long shadows on the street. The media was already on site. Cameras flashing, reporters yelling into microphones. Marcus didn't have to say a word. Danielle was already in motion, making the call to David. Within moments, the flash drive containing the damning evidence was sent off to every major media outlet. As the first news reports hit the airwaves, the truth began to spread like wildfire. Granger's empire, his web of lies, deceit, and exploitation, was unraveling in front of the world. But for Marcus and Danielle, it wasn't just about the victory. It was about the lives they had saved, the people they had protected, and the fact that they had done what so many thought was impossible. As the media swarm intensified, Marcus turned to Danielle. "It's done," he said, finally allowing himself. A breath. The storm had broken. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines blasted across the globe. Corruption, deceit, and the fall of one of the most powerful men in the country. Granger's empire was crumbling under the weight of the evidence Marcus and Danielle had uncovered. The media had no mercy, and for the first time in years, Granger was facing the reality of his actions, but the victory felt hollow to Marcus. He knew the battle was far from over. Granger wouldn't go down without a fight. In fact, Marcus had. I expected this. Granger had more than enough resources, connections, and influence to make sure he wouldn't be held accountable. The phone call came just after dawn. "Marcus," David's voice was tense. Granger's lawyers are already working overtime. The Pentagon's called in a few favors. They're pulling strings to discredit you, to discredit everything you've done. Marcus stood at the window of the small apartment he and Danielle had holed up in. The sun was rising, but it was hard to see any light beyond the dark clouds of what was to come. I expected this, Marcus said quietly. Granger will do everything he can to turn the tables. He's not going down without taking a few people with him. Danielle walked up, behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. What now? She asked, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. Marcus exhaled, his gaze drifting to the city skyline. Now, we finish this. We make sure Granger doesn't walk away from this. The counterattack over the next few days, the media circus only grew worse. The government was denying the validity of the evidence Marcus and Danielle had leaked. Granger's legal team was painting them as terrorists, labeling the leaks as nothing more than a staged attack on national security. The Pentagon was in damage control mode, and every attempt to discredit Marcus felt like another blow to the heart. But Marcus wasn't the kind to back down. He'd known this was going to happen. The fight wasn't just about bringing Granger to justice. It was about making sure the world knew what he'd done and how deep his connections went. Marcus met with David and a few trusted allies. They were going to need more than just legal strategy to win this fight. They needed the truth to pierce through the lies that Granger's people were spinning. We can't just sit back and wait for Granger to make his move, David said, his voice low. We need to turn the tables on him, take the fight to the people he's trying to protect. Marcus nodded. We need to get the military involved. If we can expose how far Granger's influence reaches, how many people he's controlling, it'll be impossible for them to cover this up. In the crosshairs, the first move came from Granger's side. A well-placed rumor spread that Marcus had been involved in illegal arms deals, using his military background as a cover. The media quickly ran with the story, casting a shadow of suspicion. Over Marcus, Danielle's phone rang late one night. We have a problem. David's voice crackled through the line. They've got a target on Marcus. They're framing him for a crime he didn't commit, something big. They're going to make sure this all falls back on him. Danielle's pulse quickened. What do we do? We're going to fight. Back, Marcus replied, his voice unwavering. If they want to play dirty, we'll play even dirtier. The unthinkable. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Marcus and Danielle had few places to turn. Every safe house, every friend, and every ally they'd built was compromised. It became clear Granger's influence had reached farther than anyone could have imagined. But as Marcus dug deeper into the Pentagon's involvement, he uncovered something even more disturbing, an unthinkable alliance between Granger and a faction of the government. The revelation hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. The very people who were supposed to uphold the law, protect the citizens, and ensure justice were the ones who had been backing Granger for years. His power wasn't just financial, it was political. And now, with the power of the military backing him, Granger had the ability to make sure Marcus never saw the light of day again. Danielle stared at the document in disbelief. How is this possible? She whispered. How could they let him get this far? It's not just about him anymore, Marcus said, voice cold. It's about everyone who has been turning a blind eye to what he's been doing. It's bigger than us. The game changer. But Marcus wasn't one to back down from a fight. He had one final move, a move that would turn the tables for good. If they could get the evidence in front of the right people, in the hands of someone with enough power to break Granger's grip, it would be over. The question was, who could be trusted? I know who we need to talk to, Marcus said after thinking for a long moment. There's one person who has the ability to expose all of this. They're in a position to make it official and get the military involved. David raised an eyebrow. Who? Admiral Jacobs, Marcus replied. She's the only one who has the clout to take this to the top and make sure Granger's people can't just sweep it under the rug. Danielle looked uneasy. You think she's trustworthy? We've been burned before by people with power. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't have a choice. She's the last link we have. The deal a few days later, Marcus and Danielle met with Admiral Jacobs in a discreet location, far away from the prying eyes of the media and Granger's network. The Admiral was sharp, her reputation for integrity well known, but Marcus could tell she was already skeptical. "I'm not in the business of making enemies with people who have the Pentagon on their side," she said, folding her arms as she studied the evidence. "This could cost me my career." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "If you don't take this, Admiral, it's not just your career at risk, it's the country. Granger has built an empire off of lies, and if we don't stop him, he'll keep destroying lives." Jacobs was silent for a long time, her fingers tapping against the table as she processed the information. Finally, she spoke. "All right, I'll help you," she said. "But you need to know something, Marcus. This is going to get dangerous. There will be no turning back once we move forward." Marcus met her gaze without hesitation. "I'm not afraid of the fight. We started this, and we're finishing it. Together." The final countdown now, with Admiral Jacobs' help, they had the backing they needed. But Granger wasn't going to give up so easily. As the countdown to their next move began, Marcus knew that the final battle was on the horizon. Granger would be coming for them with everything he had, and this time the stakes were higher than ever. As the last pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Marcus's mind was focused. The only way out now was through, and he wasn't about to let anyone or anything stand in his way. The hours were slipping away, and Marcus could feel the weight of every passing minute. The operation to bring Granger to justice was set in motion, but there was no illusion about how dangerous it would be. Granger's allies in the military, his loyal cadre of enforcers, and the legal machinery he had built over the years were all in place, ready to fight tooth and nail to keep him out of prison. Marcus, Danielle, and Admiral Jacobs were in a small, secure briefing room within an undisclosed military facility. The walls were lined with maps and classified intel, but the room felt small compared to the size of the task ahead. The only sound was the clicking of a keyboard as David, now working as the tech lead on this operation, input the final details of their plan. "We're on a countdown," David said, glancing up from his screen. "If we don't act in the next few hours, Granger will use the media to twist this all around and have us labeled as the criminals. The Pentagon is already mobilizing to cover his tracks." Danielle clenched her fists in frustration. "It feels like we're walking into a trap. How do we know we can trust Jacobs? What if this is all part of Granger's bigger scheme?" Marcus met her gaze, his expression resolute. "Jacobs has her own stake in this now. If we fail, not only does her career go down the drain, but we lose everything we've worked for. This is her shot at redemption too." Admiral Jacobs was sitting across from them, her sharp eyes watching the room's clock tick down. "I know. What's at stake here?" she said, her voice steady. "And I know this isn't just about you, Marcus. This is about everything Granger has done, about the system he's corrupted. I'm in." Marcus nodded, turning his attention to the mission ahead. "So, what's the plan?" The final hour. The operation was simple, at least in theory. They had an inside contact at the Pentagon, a high-ranking officer who had quietly agreed to help them expose Granger's involvement in the corruption. With Jacobs leading the charge, they had a direct line to the top brass, which was crucial for bypassing the layers of red tape Granger had constructed. The goal was to gain access to a secure data vault within a private military facility, a vault that contained irrefutable evidence of Granger's covert deals with foreign powers and his manipulation of key government officials. The vault's contents would be the smoking gun they needed to destroy Granger's political career once and for all. But getting into that vault wasn't going to be easy. "We have a 2-hour window," David said, "before Granger's military. Contacts catch wind of our move. Once that happens, they'll lock down everything. We need to be in and out quickly, no time for mistakes." Danielle was already preparing herself mentally. "We'll have to move fast, and we can't afford to get caught." Marcus looked over at her. "I know what you're thinking. We've been through a lot to get here. I don't want to lose anyone. We'll get through this, but we stick to the plan. No deviations." The heist A's the team made their way to the facility. The tension in the air was palpable. They were all too aware that they were heading into enemy territory. Every soldier they passed on the way to the vault was another potential threat. One wrong move, one slip-up, and it could all be over. Jacobs led them through the halls, a clear picture of composure. Her military background and her connections within the Pentagon made her the perfect person, to navigate the labyrinth of security measures they'd have to overcome. With her code in hand, they were able to bypass the majority of the high-tech security systems, each layer of protection peeling away under Jacob's guidance. Then they reached the vault. The door was steel, reinforced with state-of-the-art locks, but nothing the team couldn't handle. David moved to the control panel and began working on cracking the security code. It was tight. Granger had anticipated this, and the system was designed to protect against even the most skilled hackers. But David was faster. With a few quick keystrokes, he broke through the final barrier. The vault door creaked open, revealing rows of files and hard drives, evidence of Granger's deals, his manipulation of politicians, his profiteering off the backs of soldiers, and his plans to sell military secrets to the highest bidder. "This is it," Marcus whispered, stepping inside. He couldn't help but feel a surge of adrenaline. They had everything they needed to bring Granger to his knees, but as he reached for the first folder, a loud alarm blared to life. "Damn it!" David cursed, his fingers flying over the panel again. "We're out of time. They're coming." The chase panic spread through the team as red lights flashed and alarms screamed throughout the facility. Jacob's face hardened. "We've got minutes before the place is crawling with soldiers. Grab everything you can and let's move." Marcus and Danielle quickly gathered the files and hard drives while Jacobs covered their backs. They made their way to the emergency exit, but as they rounded the corner, they ran straight into a group of heavily armed soldiers. "Stop right there," one of the soldiers barked. Without thinking, Marcus shoved Danielle behind him, pulling out his weapon. He had no choice but to act quickly. A brief but violent gunfight broke out. Jacobs was efficient, taking down the first soldier with ease. David, too, was prepared, firing expertly at their attackers, forcing them to retreat. "Go, go, go," Jacobs yelled, pushing them toward the exit. They made it out into the night, the adrenaline still pumping as they ran through the dark streets. But even as they escaped the facility, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of Granger's forces. The truth comes out by the time they reached the safe house, they were all on edge, but the data they had retrieved was enough to bring down Granger once and for all. With Admiral Jacobs's help, they had access to the Pentagon's highest-level networks, and they immediately started distributing the evidence to key figures in the government and the press. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, news outlets across the world were covering the scandal. Granger's empire began to crumble as more and more officials distanced themselves from him, his dirty deals exposed for everyone to see. Marcus sat down on the couch, exhausted. His mind was still racing, but there was a sense of finality in the air. Granger was finished. "You did it," Danielle said softly, sitting next to him. Marcus looked at her, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "We did it." But just as they thought the fight was over, a final message came through. Granger wasn't done yet. The war had just begun. The night had fallen heavy over the city, and Marcus sat at the small wooden table in their safe house, surrounded by the chaos of military plans and encrypted files. Outside, the usual sounds of the city had grown distant, as if everything had slowed down, preparing for the final confrontation. Danielle stood by the window, her back to the team, eyes scanning the horizon as though searching for something she couldn't quite name. The tension in the room was palpable. Their victory felt incomplete. Granger might have lost his power and influence, but Marcus and his team knew better than anyone. He wasn't going down without a fight. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, staring at the map spread before him. The evidence they had gathered had shaken the foundations of Granger's empire. But the military general was still at large, still surrounded by a network of loyalists willing to fight for him. He had his own resources and was reportedly hiding in a series of bunkers, well-equipped, well-guarded. Marcus could already feel the weight of the final battle pressing in on them. "How much time do we have?" he asked, breaking the silence. David, who had been hunched over his laptop, paused for a moment. "They're moving fast. Granger knows. We've exposed his plans. If we don't take him down in the next 48 hours, he'll disappear again. He'll leverage whatever he has left to escape to one of his safe houses, somewhere no one can get to him. We'll never find him." Danielle's voice, low but steady, cut through the tension. "We need to take everything away from him, not just the evidence, but his network, his supporters. We need to make it so there's no escape for him." "Marcus," nodded. Exactly, we end this now. This is the only chance we have. Admiral Jacobs stood, her sharp eyes narrowing as she looked at the information David had pulled up on the screen. I've arranged a final strike. We'll have to move fast, hit multiple targets at once. We'll need all available forces, and we can't afford to leave anything to chance. Granger's allies won't go down without a fight. The weight of the mission hung heavy on all of them, but Marcus knew there was no turning back now. The pieces were in place. The time had come to end Granger's reign of corruption, once and for all. The final assault. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Marcus and his team began their journey. The hum of the military convoy filled the air as it rolled, through the deserted streets toward the last known location of Granger's compound. A network of bunkers, fortified, isolated, and highly secure. This was the place that Granger had called his last refuge. Jacobs led the charge, her voice calm but commanding as she issued orders through the comms system. We'll hit them from the north and south, divide and conquer. We can't afford a prolonged standoff. The goal is to neutralize Granger and his inner circle. Everything else is secondary. David was already plugged into the military network, using his hacking expertise to disrupt their communication systems and disable any security measures that might slow them down. We've got their systems on lockdown, he said. They won't see us coming. Marcus glanced at Danielle, who was loading her weapon, her face set in a mask of determination. We get Granger, Marcus said, more to himself than anyone else. The convoy reached the edge of the compound, the towering concrete walls standing like a grim reminder of the corruption within. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time there was something different in the air. The finality of this mission settled on his shoulders, and with it, a heavy sense of justice that needed to be served. Move out, Jacobs barked. Inside the bunkers, the team split up as planned. Marcus, Danielle, and Jacobs led the assault team through the northern entrance, while David and a backup unit approached from the south. The fortified compound was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of boots on gravel and the occasional crackle of radio static. As they moved deeper into the compound, they encountered their first resistance. Armed guards, positioned in strategic locations, began to engage the team. Danielle moved fluidly, clearing rooms with precision, her eyes sharp for any sign of movement. Marcus had done this too many times to count, each shot, each movement instinctual. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another mission. This was the end. They fought their way deeper, each bunker a new battleground. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, the ground slick with rain from the earlier storm. Time seemed to stretch as they pushed forward, every step bringing them closer to Granger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the heart of the compound. The control room, the place where Granger would make his final stand. On me, Jacobs ordered, leading them into the room. They moved inside to find the place deserted. Granger was gone. His people had vanished. Marcus cursed under his breath. He's playing us again. Danielle's eyes scanned the room, and her gaze landed on a small computer terminal. This is his escape route, she said, typing rapidly. It's a failsafe, a private jet. He's making a run for it. David's voice came over the comms. We've got a location on his jet. It's heading for the airstrip. He won't get far. Not on my watch, Marcus muttered. The final confrontation. They raced to the airstrip, the engines of their vehicles roaring to life as they sped through the compound's winding roads. Marcus was silent, his focus singular. This was it, the final confrontation. Granger wouldn't escape this time. As they reached the airstrip, the jet was already taxied and ready for takeoff. But Granger wasn't getting away that easily. Jacobs took the lead again, her voice steady but urgent. We're going to disable the jet before he can lift off. David hacked into the jet's navigation system, locking it down remotely. The engines sputtered and died. Panic set in among Granger's men as they scrambled to figure out what had happened. Marcus and his team moved in fast, weapons drawn, and then there he was, General Granger standing on the steps of the jet, his face twisted in rage. How you think this is over, don't you? He shouted, his voice booming across the tarmac. You've only just begun to understand the power I have. Marcus stepped forward, his weapon aimed at Granger. "This is the end, Granger. You're finished," Granger sneered, reaching for his own weapon. But before he could draw it, Jacobs's voice cut through the tension. "It's over, General. Surrender now." For a moment, time seemed to stand still as Granger glared at them, his eyes filled with venom. But then his shoulders slumped, and with a grimace he dropped his weapon. "You've won," he spat, his voice barely above a whisper. Resolution Granger was arrested, and the world watched as his empire crumbled. The evidence was irrefutable, and within days he was tried, convicted, and sent to prison for the rest of his life. His downfall was swift and brutal, the result of his own arrogance and betrayal. Marcus, Danielle, Jacobs, and David stood together, watching the news coverage of Granger's conviction. The feeling of relief was bittersweet. They had won, but the cost had been high. So many lives had been affected by Granger's corruption, and though justice had been served, the scars would remain. As the screen flashed the final image of Granger behind bars, Marcus turned to his team. "We did it," he said quietly. "But we never forget what it took to get here." Danielle nodded. "And we keep pushing forward, for all the people who couldn't." Marcus smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. "Yeah, for all of them." The finality of it all settled in. The battle had been hard, but it was over. Granger was finished, and the world would never forget the name of the black general who had brought him down.